Hello, welcome back to the Disneyland Show. I'm Adam, and today we are continuing our in-depth series with one of my personal favorites, Space Mountain. Now, Space Mountain is one of those rides that no matter who you are, if you're a fan or not, even if you haven't been to the park, lots of people know the name Space Mountain. And that is why I am extremely excited to get this podcast episode out. This is one of my favorite attractions in the parks, and of the 5 peaks of the Disneyland Resort, it's my number one pick every time. This ride has history and good amount of facts to it, and it's a very enjoyable ride, and they even make the queue interesting. So let's get started, jump right in. Now, Walt envisioned this attraction in his mind in around the 60s, a couple of years after the park opened, because Space Mountain was lacking in people visiting there, and just like no one really wanted to go there. It was sparse and dead compared to the rest of the park, and Walt wanted this like an attraction like Space Mountain to be made to bring some oomph and popularity back to Tomorrowland, because his dream of Tomorrowland wasn't being fulfilled. But he ended up working on rides like It's a Small World for the World's Fair anyway, and they never really returned to it when Walt was alive, sadly, because he passed away shortly after World's Fair. But they did return to this idea for both Walt Disney World and Disneyland, and it was made in Disneyland in 1977. It took 2 years for construction, because as soon as it was a success in Walt Disney World, they decided to make it in Disneyland. The queue used to have an escalator going up to the space stage on the top, like right next to the queue in Tomorrowland, and the queue would actually start when you enter the Space Mountain building, not the other building next to Space Mountain instead, and it cut out the whole outside part of the queue for Space Mountain. But it does make sense on why they did this, because they wanted to add more queue room, because this was a very popular attraction. And in the new Tomorrowland refurb, like I was talking about in the Astro Orbiters episode, it was painted bronze and copper to make it look like a steampunk future, because they weren't doing too well and they didn't have as much money for a refurb, but they did still want to change it. I don't know why. It was perfect as it was before it backlashed, and fans really wanted the original Space Mountain back, so they painted it back to the retro sleek all white, which that in my opinion, that's what Tomorrowland is. And the mountain included the Starcade, restaurants, and the space stages I was talking about earlier, in the building, and it was like kind of a bigger building than it really is today. But sadly, Starcade and the space stage aren't with us. Starcade has just been removed, and it's kind of like Epcot, just like empty. And the space stage is part of the queue in Space Mountain now, which at least it's still being utilized for something. It's not just sitting around like the space stage, but I still kind of think that they should do something with it. They should kind of bring back the space stage and stuff. And it received a record-breaking audience in the first 3 days of 180,000 guests in the span of 3 days. But keep in mind, this is an old record. It has been outdone, but at the time it was a record, and it included some actual spacemen and astronauts, going on the ride, which is very cool, and they all had a good time on it. And they said that the line went in those days went all the way back to the stroller pickup in Tomorrowland, which is also part of the reason why they extended the queue nowadays, just in case they ever have something like that. The pillars on the outside of the mountain are used for multiple reasons, and this is why another reason why I love Disneyland. How they're able to utilize things for so many different things. They're, the pillars are support beams, but they're on the outside, so they make it smooth on the inside, so they could project stars, galaxies, moons, asteroids, all that on the inside of the mountain to make it a smoother projection, like you're actually in space. But they also support pillars and to make the mountain look taller than it actually is. Some forced perspective, and Disneyland is well known for that. It only uses one track, unlike Walt Disney World, and it had a 2-year refurb to change the whole track because it was gonna crumble and wasn't stable anymore. It was not stable, and it was gonna go. It could have gone down any minute, so they went 2-year refurb to change the whole track, and we could barely do it when Big Thunder closed down for almost a full year. Just imagine how. Just imagine if that was in today, we wouldn't have been able to get through it. Some people would have rather had the crumbly track, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And this is one of the attractions that has multiple overlays. It used to have multiple music overlays where they would, you know, put lots of music in it, like copyright and stuff, just to bring more audiences in to make it look, we're young, we're all that, but they didn't really need that. But they also have a Ghost Galaxy for Halloween, and they also have, I'm not sure if they still do this, but I think it's called Jedi's Path, which is it was for May the 4th, and it was a Star Wars overlay, which was also cool. Kind of fit in with Star Tours, which is also cool, like the Disneyland Cinematic Universe. And yeah. Now, the ride is a moderate loader, so for loading speed, so it's not the fastest, but it's not the slowest. And it's a roller coaster dark ride. It's not a dark ride, but it like Fantasyland, but it's kind of more literally a dark ride. You're a roller coaster in the dark with only some stars and a galaxy around you, and it just looks beautiful. The ride lasts for 2 minutes and 45 seconds, which I think that's a good time for how long you're waiting, but you should get a fast pass for this ride, let's be honest. And anyway, let's head over to queue and ride through. So, nowadays, you enter the building at the end of Tomorrowland through a long hallway where there's just uh, like a little I'm not sure what they're called. It's just it's like a sign. Yeah, it's kind of a sign. Just going that says Space Mountain, and then all the wait times. So, which leads you up a ramp, a concrete ramp, which I was talking about before, and that leads you to the Tomorrowland Space Stage, which I was also talking about before. And that's just used for when there's lots of people. When there's not lots of people, you just zoom right by it. But then you enter the actual mountain and go through a corridor. But the corridor before you enter was where the actual queue started. It was red. It was a red sign that said Space Mountain, and it was neon. Kind of fits in with that retro vibe as well. Then it had the rules of the ride talking to you. You know that guy on the video that you see when you're walking by? It says store your bags under the thing. This is a motion simulator ride in the dark with lots of turns, drops, and sudden stops. Those play at the start before you hear astronauts talking Houston, we have a problem, and all of that. And the corridor you're in, you go straight, and then you see a picture of Space Station 77, which, cleverly enough, is the space station we're in. It's called 77 because it was made in 1977. And they did a good job on this art because they took the Space Mountain building and they made it into the actual space station. And it was pretty cool. Then you would take a right, and this hallway would be lit up by red lights before you'd go down a step through another door into a corridor with blue lights. And then you'd enter an octagon-like shape, which with about like 4 or 5 doors. There's one that you went through that was called Launch Port Gamma, which that leads you to the launch port where we embark on our journey. Then there was also Gauntry 42, Gauntry 22, Gauntry 44, which I assume are like, you can't go in them, but I assume they're like elevators, kind of like the Gauntry lifts in Guardians of the Galaxy. And also, there was Space Station Exit, which was an exit if there's like a malfunction and you had to, or like an evacuation, or if you physically felt like you couldn't do this attraction, like you were freaking out and panicking about it. But you wouldn't really go through that door in your lifetime. But anyway, you enter the door, launch port Gamma. Then you enter the loading room with the rocket ship suspended from the roof. You slowly descend, going down a ramp into the line where you enter your ride vehicle. You would eventually enter your ride vehicle, and then when you enter your ride vehicle, you would go straight, pretty slowly, before you would turn right into the first lift hill, before going into a right turn that turns into a straightaway with flashing blue lights at you, before you go into a final lift hill, which is shooting you into space. When you first get into space, you hear a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As you're slowly moving, before all of a sudden you start zooming and flying through space, which is very cool as you see all the stars around you. It's wonderful, and the music is one of my favorite soundtracks for a Disney park in general. Then you start by going right into the darkness 2 times while going down, then a left before a straightaway, and another right, then another before a bumpy straightaway, then another right, and a gradual drop. You go in a circle that's going right to the bottom of the coaster. A picture happens in the dark tunnel, then you emerge at the start, leaving your vehicle from the right as you go through a hall, up some stairs, and into the picture room where you could preview your picture to see if you want to buy it or not. Then you leave that room and you go into the main room, which is the washrooms, the water fountains, and the gift shop. And you leave, you go back like the hallway that you came in, and you're done. So that's Space Mountain for you. The ride-through might not be perfect, like my description of it, but you gotta keep in mind, it's hard for you to find a perfect video of Space Mountain full point of view, because I could upload a black screen and just put a video of like the couple lift hills in before and put some white dots on the black. People would think it's a Space Mountain video. Add the music. So I had to look for some with lights on, which is very cool. I would love to, if there was one ride I would like to have broken down, it would be Space Mountain, because you could go in dark and go in it while it's lights on, and that's something that's very cool. This ride is a hands down max pass. This is a ride that you must go on if it's not closed or like for refurb or anything. You have to go on this ride. It's my favorite of the 5 peaks of Disney and one of my favorite rides in the park in general. I love this ride, and it made Tomorrowland a better place. Who knew? If it wasn't for Space Mountain bringing more attendance into Tomorrowland, we may have not gotten Tomorrowland anymore. They could have removed it to add something different, and that would have made like no rides like Star Tours, which would have led to no Galaxy's Edge. So you gotta thank this ride. This ride, it's beautiful. The music is amazing. It's just all around it's just a great ride. Max Pass, you have to go on it. That's one of the places that you should go to first. If you have your heart set on getting a fast pass in the morning, I recommend this being the first fast pass you get in Disneyland, not DCA, obviously, or the second one. Even if you could have your own opinion and you might not like it after, but you have to give it a try. You won't be disappointed. I can guarantee it's such a good ride. But yeah, that's it for Space Mountain. If you have any questions, it's tdspodcast1@gmail.com. Send us questions about this podcast, our latest episodes, this episode's, what could be coming in the future, or even just, questions for me and Nathan. We can answer it. Yeah. Anyway, have a good day. And this is Adam. See you next time.